Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail into the choppy, unforgiving waters of the North Sea. We're not going on a pleasure cruise, though. No, tonight. We're strapping on our helmets, maybe. If you're lucky enough to own one. Grabbing our axes and reluctantly joining a Viking raid. Forget the glorious sagas, we're diving into the grim, often miserable, reality of why Viking raids truly sucked for everyone involved. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone, including you. The reluctant raider? Trust me, you probably wouldn't last 5 minutes before getting seasick, or accidentally cutting off your own toe. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on the rocky shore of your homeland, a place of stark beauty and unforgiving soil. The air is cold, biting, carrying the scent of salt and damp earth. Around you, the murmur of the gathered men is a mix of nervous anticipation and grim determination. You are not a chieftain, not a seasoned warrior, but a farmer, perhaps a fisherman, or a young man with too many mouths to feed and too little land to do it with. Life here, in the fjords, is hard. The growing season is short, the winter's long and brutal, and the demands of your family weigh heavily on your shoulders. For generations, your people have eked out a living from this harsh land and the treacherous sea. But now, with a growing population and dwindling resources, simply surviving isn't enough. There's talk of opportunity, of wealth to be found across the treacherous waters. In lands rumored to be rich and soft, lands of gold and silver, of easy pickings from complacent monks and undefended villages. This is the promise that echoes through the crowded longhouses. A siren song tempting you away from the familiar. Grinding poverty of home. You look at the longship beached on the shore. Its sleek, powerful lines a testament to generations of shipbuilding skill. It's a beautiful vessel, but also a symbol of incredible risk. You've heard the stories of storms, of ships lost to the unforgiving waves, of men swallowed by the frigid depths. The thought sends a shiver down your spine that has nothing to do with the cold. This journey is not a matter of choice for many. It's a desperate gamble, a venture into the unknown driven by necessity. Your family, watching from a distance, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and dread, are counting on you. A universal historical fact that explains your presence here is the economic and environmental pressures in Scandinavia during the late 8th and 9th centuries. Population growth, limited arable land, and a desire for wealth and prestige pushed many Norsemen to look beyond their familiar shores. Raiding wasn't just about wanton violence, it was often a desperate economic strategy, a way to acquire resources, land, and status that were scarce at home. You're not just a bloodthirsty marauder, you're a product of circumstance, pushed to the brink by the realities of your harsh homeland. A peculiar, less commonly known detail that might surprise you is the democratic, almost voluntary, nature of many early Viking raids, while powerful chieftains led expeditions. Many smaller raids were undertaken by groups of ambitious young men, pooling resources and risking their lives together. You might be here not because a king demanded it, but because your local Jarl Earl organized an expedition. Or perhaps even a group of young men from your village decided to try their luck. This wasn't always a conscripted army, it was often a collective gamble by desperate individuals. As you prepare to board, an intriguing academic debate arises: to what extent were the early Viking raids driven by a coherent, expansionist policy, versus being opportunistic ventures by independent groups? While later Viking activity certainly included conquest and settlement, the initial waves of raids appear to have been more sporadic. Opportunistic attacks on coastal targets. Were these well-planned strategies from a nascent Viking state? Or simply the natural evolution of desperate local ventures? You, standing on the beach, feel the localized desperation, not the grand design of an empire. You carry your meager possessions, a worn leather pouch with a few coins if you have them, a small carving, perhaps from your child. Your weapons are simple, a sturdy axe, perhaps a spear. No gleaming mail shirt for you, likely just thick woolen tunics and trousers. Perhaps a leather cap. You are a warrior of necessity, not luxury. Your hands, usually accustomed to the plow or fishing net, now grip the cold iron of your axe. Feeling its unfamiliar weight, the call comes. A shout from the longship's stern. Urging you aboard? You wade into the icy water, feeling the chill seep through your boots, clinging to your leggings. The ship is crowded, filled with men whose faces mirror your own mix of fear and grim resolve. You find a spot, shoulder to shoulder with your comrades. The scent of unwashed bodies, stale ale, and damp wood already overwhelming in the confined space. The ship pushes off, the long oars dipping into the waves with a rhythmic splash. The square sail unfurls, catching the brisk wind, and the ship begins to glide over the water. Leaving the familiar shores of your fjord behind, you watch as your home shrinks, becoming a distant silhouette against the gray sky. There's a knot in your stomach, a mix of anxiety and a strange, unsettling excitement. You are truly leaving everything you know behind, embarking on a journey from which many will not return. The first few hours are tolerable, the land still in sight, the waves relatively calm, but as the ship ventures further into the open sea, the true nature of the voyage begins to reveal itself. The longship, while seaworthy, is an open vessel, offering little protection from the elements. The wind whips across the deck, chilling you to the bone. The spray of the waves washes over the gunwales, soaking your clothes. This is not the gentle sway of a fishing boat. This is the relentless, unforgiving motion of the open ocean. And you, the reluctant raider, are about to discover why the sea itself is often a more formidable foe than any man. The open sea quickly reveals its brutal nature, far removed from the sheltered fjords of your homeland. The longship, while a marvel of engineering for its time, is fundamentally an open boat. There's no deck to retreat below, no cabin to shield you from the elements. You are utterly exposed to the whims of the North Sea, a vast, indifferent expanse of gray. Choppy water, you are constantly wet. Salt spray lashes over the gunwales, soaking your woolen tunic and trousers, chilling you to the bone. The air is perpetually cold, even on what might be considered a fair day. When the wind picks up, it whips across the deck with an icy bite, tearing at your hair and chilling your ears. There's no escaping the damp, no way to truly dry out. Your clothes become heavy, clammy, and the persistent cold seeps into your muscles, leaving them stiff and aching. The motion of the ship is relentless. It pitches and rolls, plunges and rises, a nauseating rhythm that quickly claims many of your comrades. You feel your stomach churn, the bile rising in your throat. Seasickness becomes a constant companion, a miserable, debilitating condition that drains your energy and makes even the thought of eating unbearable. You try to fix your gaze on the distant horizon, but the world spins, and the acrid taste of vomit becomes familiar. It's an indignity you hadn't prepared for, a weakness that makes you feel utterly miserable and useless. Meals are a grim affair. You huddle with your fellow raiders, sharing meager rations of dried fish, hardtack, or salted meat. The food is bland, often stale, and rendered almost inedible by your persistent nausea. Fresh water is a precious commodity, rationed carefully, often tasting brackish from the wooden casks. Every bite, every swallow, is an effort, a necessary fueling of a body that feels utterly betrayed by its environment. A universal historical fact that quickly becomes your lived reality is the extreme discomfort and danger of longship voyages. These ships, while incredibly fast and versatile for raiding, offered almost no amenities for their crews. Lack of shelter, proper sanitation, and fresh water. Combined with the constant threat of hypothermia and seasickness, made voyages incredibly arduous, even deadly. You are not on a luxury cruise, you are in a floating endurance test, a peculiar, less commonly known detail that you might observe on these long voyages is the ingenious, albeit primitive, methods for waste disposal, with no latrines on board. The men simply relieved themselves over the side of the ship, often using a relief pole to extend out from the hull and avoid fouling the longship itself. It's a small, unglamorous detail, but one that speaks volumes about the practical, if crude, adaptations necessary for survival on such cramped, open vessels. Imagine the smell on a calm day as you endure the constant discomfort. An intriguing academic debate arises. To what extent did the shared hardship and discomfort of longship voyages foster a unique sense of camaraderie and bonding among Viking crews? Or did it primarily exacerbate tensions and personal misery, while certainly miserable? Enduring such extreme conditions together could forge powerful bonds of trust and reliance. Conversely, constant seasickness, cramped conditions, and fear could just as easily lead to irritability and conflict. You, huddled with your wet, miserable comrades, feel both the shared suffering and the desperate need to rely on each other. Sleep is a fleeting luxury, stolen in short, uncomfortable bursts. You huddle against your comrades for warmth, trying to ignore the constant pitching and rolling of the ship, the creak of the timbers, and the rhythmic splashing of the waves. There's no privacy, no true rest. Every bone in your body aches, and the constant chill makes it difficult to find any real solace. You pull your thick woolen cloak tighter, but it does little to keep out the penetrating damp. The constant vigilance is another draining aspect, even while trying to rest. A part of your mind remains alert, listening for the shouted commands of the steersman, the sudden change in the wind, the cry of "man overboard," though such an event would almost certainly mean a quick, cold end. You are always aware of the vast, indifferent ocean around you, a powerful entity that could, at any moment, decide your fate. The sun, when it appears, is a welcome, though often fleeting, sight. You try to catch its warmth, letting it soak into your chilled skin, but the clouds often roll in quickly, bringing more wind and spray. The days blur into an indistinguishable continuum of cold, wet, and nauseating motion. You begin to question the promise of wealth, wondering if any treasure could truly compensate for this relentless misery. You learn to perform your duties despite the discomfort. You take your turn at the oars. The rhythmic pull of the heavy wood, a dull ache in your shoulders and back. You learn to brace yourself against the waves, to tie and untie ropes with numb fingers, to trim the sail in a sudden gust of wind. Your body adapts, slowly, grudgingly, to the demands of the sea, becoming a testament to human resilience in the face of extreme discomfort. This is the hidden cost of the glorious Viking sagas. This is the unglamorous reality of the longship, where bravery is less about heroic deeds and more about enduring the relentless misery of the voyage itself. You are a wet, cold, seasick farmer turned raider, and the distant shores promise only more uncertainty. After what feels like an eternity of chilling spray and churning stomachs, a collective murmur ripples through the longship. There, on the horizon, a faint, dark line begins to resolve itself. Land? The word is whispered, then repeated. A wave of relief washing over the cramped, miserable crew. You lean forward, straining your eyes through the lingering sea spray, and indeed, the indistinct smudge gradually morphs into the unmistakable silhouette of a coastline. Trees, hills, and finally structures. This isn't the familiar, rugged outline of your homeland. This is a foreign shore, greener, softer, seemingly richer. The tension on the ship shifts. from the gnawing dread of the open sea to a new, sharper anticipation. The rhythmic dipping of the oars intensifies as the steersman guides the longship towards a suitable landing. You scan the coastline, your eyes narrowed, searching for any signs of settlement, any hint of the wealth that has driven you across these treacherous waters. As the ship draws closer, the details become clearer. A cluster of buildings, perhaps a small village, or more tantalizingly, a monastery. Monasteries are known targets, rich in gold, silver, and precious artifacts. Often poorly defended, their inhabitants devoted to prayer rather than combat. The thought of such easy riches sparks a flicker of grim excitement, momentarily overriding the lingering nausea and aches from the voyage. A universal historical fact that explains this target selection is the wealth and vulnerability of Christian monasteries and churches in early medieval Europe. Unlike fortified towns or castles, monasteries were often built in isolated, fertile locations, accumulating vast riches through donations and agricultural output. Their inhabitants were typically unarmed monks and nuns, making them incredibly tempting targets for raiders seeking easy plunder. They were essentially undefended banks filled with gold, silver, and other valuables that were considered holy. But to you, they are simply treasure, a peculiar, less commonly known detail that might cross your mind as you approach is the Viking practice of portage, or dragging their ships overland to bypass defenses or reach new waterways. While not always necessary for coastal raids, the ability of longships to be remarkably light and easily carried by their crews meant that even inland settlements were not entirely safe. You might recall stories of other raids where ships were dragged for miles, revealing the incredible ingenuity and relentless determination of your people, and adding another layer of threat to unsuspecting communities. As your ship glides closer to the shore, an intriguing academic debate arises. To what extent did the Vikings view their raids as purely opportunistic acts of piracy, versus a more religiously or culturally sanctioned form of warfare and resource acquisition? While the Christian chroniclers certainly depicted them as godless barbarians, Norse sagas often speak of raids as a path to glory, a way to gain honor and wealth for their families and chieftains, sometimes even linked to their polytheistic beliefs. Are you a pirate or a warrior fulfilling a cultural imperative? You gripping your axe, feel the pragmatic need for survival overriding any philosophical considerations. The longship grates against the pebbled shore, the sound amplified in the sudden, tense silence that falls over the crew. You leap out, splashing into the shallow, icy water, your feet sinking slightly into the unfamiliar sand. The land feels solid, blessedly stable. After the constant rocking of the sea, you pull your axe from your belt, feeling the cold weight of the iron in your hand. The grim resolve returns, replacing the seasickness and aches. Your chieftain, or the Jarl leading this expedition, barks orders, his voice low but authoritative. The men fan out, forming a loose line, their steps silent on the unfamiliar ground. The air is still, save for the whisper of the wind through the tall grass and the distant cries of seabirds. This is the calm before the storm, the tense moment before violence erupts. You move with the others, your eyes scanning the terrain. Your senses heightened. The scent of wood smoke, faint and tantalizing, drifts on the breeze. It confirms a settlement, a target. Your heart pounds in your chest, a mix of adrenaline and lingering fear. This isn't your first raid, perhaps, but each one carries the same chilling anticipation. The knowledge that your life hangs by a thread. The path leads you through a small copse of trees. And then, suddenly, there it is, a cluster of simple wooden buildings, a small chapel with a modest bell tower and fields beyond, the very picture of peaceful, unsuspecting life. You see figures moving in the distance, perhaps monks tending to their chores, entirely unaware of the silent, predatory force rapidly approaching their sanctuary. The chieftain raises his hand, a silent signal. The men halt, Breathing shallowly, you adjust your grip on your axe, feeling the rough wood against your palm. This is the moment. The promise of wealth. The desperation that drove you from your homeland. It all converges here, in this quiet, unsuspecting place. The peace of the morning is about to be shattered, and you are a part of the storm. The quiet anticipation shatters as the chieftain's battle cry rips through the morning air. Followed by the guttural shouts of your comrades, you surge forward with them, your feet pounding on the unfamiliar earth. Axe gripped tight, the peaceful monastery, bathed in the soft morning light, transforms into a scene of sudden, terrifying chaos. The first sound you hear from the monastery isn't a challenge, but a horrified scream. Monks, roused by the sudden noise, emerge from their cells, their faces contorted in terror. They scatter, some trying to flee, others dropping to their knees in desperate prayer. Your training, brutal and brief though it was, takes over. This isn't about fair combat, it's about speed, intimidation, and overwhelming force. You join the rush, your axe finding purchase on a sturdy wooden door, splintering it with a few powerful blows. Inside, the dim interior of the chapel is filled with the scent of old incense and the glint of candlelight on religious artifacts. You see altar cloths adorned with intricate embroidery, crosses made of gleaming silver, and chalices that shimmer with gold. This is the promised wealth, right before your eyes. The initial moments are a blur of shouts, the clash of axes against wood, and the terrified cries of the monks. You grab what you can, stuffing small, valuable items into the leather pouch at your belt. A silver crucifix, a jeweled book, a heavy candelabra, anything that isn't too cumbersome but promises significant value. The urgency is paramount. You know that remaining too long risks drawing local defenses. A universal historical fact that you are now acutely aware of is the brutal efficiency of early Viking raids. These weren't pitched battles against armies. They were lightning-fast assaults on undefended or poorly defended targets. The element of surprise, coupled with the Vikings' ferocity and their swift longships, allowed them to strike hard, seize loot, and vanish before effective resistance could be mustered. You are part of this hit-and-run strategy, designed for maximum gain with minimal risk to the raiders, at least in theory. A peculiar, less commonly known detail that might strike you amidst the chaos is the Vikings' specific targeting of ecclesiastical sites. While any wealthy settlement was fair game, monasteries and churches were particularly appealing, not just for their accumulated riches, but also because they often contained precious liturgical items, finely crafted metalwork, and elaborate manuscripts. These items, valuable for their raw materials and artistry, were often easily portable. You might stumble upon an illuminated manuscript, its intricate beauty contrasting starkly with the violence surrounding it, only to consider its parchment for scraping clean and reusing, or its covers for sale. As you join in the plunder, an intriguing academic debate arises. To what extent did the Vikings' pagan beliefs or lack thereof influence their willingness to desecrate Christian holy sites? Or was it purely opportunistic and pragmatic, while some chroniclers depict them as inherently anti-Christian? Many historians argue that the Vikings were primarily driven by material gain. They raided what was rich and undefended, regardless of its religious significance. To you, the raider, the cross on the altar is not a sacred symbol, but a marker for gold and silver. Your primary concern is not theology, but survival and wealth acquisition. The air inside the monastery is soon thick with dust, the smell of splintered wood, and the pervasive fear of the monks. You hear the shouts of your comrades from other buildings, signaling their own success in finding loot. Some of the older monks, refusing to abandon their sacred objects, might be met with swift, brutal force. The violence, though not wanton, is uncompromising. You are here to take, and any resistance is met with a decisive response. You witness the gathering of captives, mostly monks or villagers unlucky enough to be caught in the initial rush. They are bound, their faces pale with terror. You know their grim fate, they will be taken back to your homeland, or sold in distant slave markets. Another form of valuable plunder, their silent desperation is a chilling counterpoint to the raiders' exultation. The chieftain's horn blasts, a sharp, piercing sound that cuts through the chaos. It's the signal to withdraw. The alarm will have been raised. Local lords or militias will be gathering. And your advantage of surprise is rapidly fading. You quickly grab a few more items, stuffing them into your now bulging pouch. The weight of the silver is surprisingly heavy, a tangible testament to your success. You retreat with your comrades, moving swiftly back towards the longship, the cries of the village now rising behind you. The transition from peaceful mourning to violent plunder, and now to swift escape, is jarring. The air, once filled with the scent of plunder, now carries a faint hint of wood smoke as some of the monastic buildings are put to the torch. A final act of devastation and a signal to any pursuers. You scramble back onto the longship, finding your place among the other raiders, who are also laden with their spoils. The captives, their hands bound, are roughly herded onto the ship, their eyes wide with terror and despair. The oars dip into the water with renewed urgency, pushing the longship away from the burning monastery, away from the sounds of human misery, and back towards the open sea. You are leaving a trail of destruction and sorrow in your wake. But for now, you are alive, and your pouch is heavier. The raid, for you, has been a success, as the longship pulls away from the burning monastery, leaving behind the screams and the smoke. A wave of fleeting triumph washes over the crew. Your pouch feels heavy, the clinking of stolen silver and the smooth feel of precious fabric, a tangible reward for the horrors just witnessed. The initial exhilaration of survival and plunder is intoxicating. You look at your comrades, their faces grimed with ash and exertion, but their eyes shining with a shared sense of accomplishment. But this elation is short-lived. As the ship gains distance from the shore, and the immediacy of the raid fades, the true, often miserable, reality of your gains begins to set in. You begin to examine your loot more closely. That gleaming silver crucifix, it's undeniably valuable, but it's heavy, awkward to carry, and carries a strong religious symbolism that might make it difficult to sell to just anyone. That beautifully illuminated manuscript, its artistic value is immense. But to you, it's just a stack of parchment that might be scraped clean for new writing, or its valuable covers removed. You also notice what you didn't get. The truly massive gold artifacts, the heavy church bells, the large stores of grain. These are too big, too cumbersome, or too difficult to transport on a swift raid. You were seeking massive wealth, but what you have is a collection of smaller, though still precious, items. The image of vast, easily acquired riches begins to crack under the harsh light of reality. A universal historical fact that quickly becomes apparent is that Viking raids, while often yielding valuable loot, were rarely as consistently lucrative or easy as the sagas might suggest. The truly massive hauls were often reserved for larger, more organized expeditions targeting major cities or securing Danegeld tribute payments. Smaller raids, like yours, often yielded less impressive, though still significant, amounts of portable wealth? You're not sailing home a rich man, merely a slightly less poor one. A peculiar, less commonly known detail that might annoy you deeply is the difficulty in assessing the true value of your plunder on the spot, and the complex process of dividing it. That ornate silver chalice might be worth a lot to a silversmith, but how do you carry it safely without damaging it? And how do you fairly divide a collection of mismatched religious artifacts, fine textiles, and a few coins among dozens of eager, exhausted raiders? Arguments often broke out during the division of spoils, fueled by exhaustion and greed, making the reward almost as stressful as the raid itself. You might already hear the beginnings of bickering among your shipmates over a particularly nice brooch. As you count your meager gains, an intriguing academic debate arises. Did the actual material wealth gained from raids consistently outweigh the immense risks and hardships undertaken by individual raiders, while chieftains and jarls certainly accumulated significant wealth? For the common raider, the answer is often less clear. Was the potential for a single good haul enough to justify the constant threat of death, injury, and the brutal conditions of the voyage you, sitting there wet and aching, with a few heavy, awkward pieces of silver, might seriously question the cost-benefit analysis? The thrill of the fight, the adrenaline of the escape, slowly dissipates, replaced by the grim realities of the return journey. The knowledge that you have just brought immense terror and suffering to a peaceful community weighs on you. Not perhaps as guilt, your culture has a different view of conquest, but as a stark reminder of the brutality inherent in your actions. The cries of the monks, the terror on the faces of the captives, these images linger in your mind. A haunting counterpoint to the glint of stolen silver. The longship, now heavier with its human cargo of captives and its material plunder, begins its long journey back across the sea. The weather, ever unpredictable, might turn foul, threatening to swamp your overloaded vessel. The very weight of the loot, initially so welcome, could become a dangerous liability in a storm. You realize that acquiring the wealth is only half the battle. Getting it home safely is another, equally perilous, challenge. You also consider the inevitable consequences back home. Your Jarl will take his share, as will the ship owner and the most skilled warriors. Your portion, while perhaps enough to tide your family over for a season, might not be the life-changing fortune you dreamed of. The harsh reality is that a single raid, even a successful one, rarely made a common farmer truly rich. It was often a temporary reprieve from poverty, a brief injection of resources into a difficult existence. The stench of smoke from the burning monastery still hangs faintly in the air, a constant reminder of the violence you inflicted. You look at the bound captives, their eyes hollow with despair, and know that their future is grim. Your success comes at their immense suffering. A stark reminder that even a successful raid leaves a trail of devastation for those on the receiving end. The promise of easy riches, the allure of distant lands, now feels tarnished by the grim reality of the process. The gold clinking in your pouch feels less like triumph and more like a heavy burden, a tangible reminder of the violent means by which it was acquired, and the ongoing risks you face to keep it. The return journey stretches out before you, long and uncertain, and you begin to understand that Viking raids indeed sucked for everyone involved. Perhaps even for you, the raider, in ways you hadn't anticipated. The brief, bloody thrill of the raid begins to fade, replaced by a new, more immediate threat resistance. Your assumption of easy pickings, of undefended wealth, shatters when the locals, perhaps emboldened by their numbers or driven by desperation, decide to fight back. You quickly learn that not every raid ends with a swift escape and a heavy pouch, as your longship attempts to make another landfall, or perhaps as you venture further inland from a seemingly quiet shore. You sense a change in the air. The usual silence of a deserted village is replaced by a tense stillness, an unnatural quiet that warns of ambush. The feeling in your gut, honed by survival in a harsh world, tells you something is wrong. Suddenly, the stillness erupts. From the tree line, from behind hastily erected barricades, or even from within the very homes you intended to plunder, figures emerge. They are not the unarmed monks or terrified farmers you encountered before. These are men with pitchforks, scythes, crude spears, and even a few rusty swords, but local militia, angered villagers, or perhaps even a detachment of the local lord's men. Their faces are grim, determined, their shouts filled with rage. Not fear, a clash of raw, unpolished violence ensues. This isn't the organized, overwhelming assault you're used to. This is a desperate, chaotic brawl. You feel the jarring impact of a peasant's cudgel against your shield, the desperate thrust of a farmer's spear narrowly missing your leg. Your axe, usually so decisive, meets unexpected resistance, deflected by a sturdy wooden staff. The air is filled with the shouts of men, the clang of crude weapons, and the desperate cries of both raider and defender. This fierce, localized resistance highlights a universal historical fact. Viking raiders often faced significant, and sometimes successful, opposition, while the initial raids capitalized on surprise and a lack of organized defense. Communities eventually adapted. Local lords built fortifications, villagers formed militias, and early warning systems were developed. Many raids ended in failure, with raiders killed, captured, or forced to flee empty-handed. Your life as a Viking raider is not a guaranteed path to wealth. It's a constant gamble against increasingly prepared adversaries. A peculiar, less commonly known detail that you might witness during these encounters is the remarkable ingenuity of local defenses. Even by seemingly simple communities, villagers might dig hidden pits filled with sharpened stakes, string tripwires, or use the dense local terrain to their advantage. They might ambush landing parties from hidden positions, or lure raiders into narrow passages where their superior weaponry is nullified. You might find yourself caught in a cleverly laid trap, underscoring the resourcefulness of those fighting for their homes and lives, as you fight desperately against this unexpected resistance. An intriguing academic debate arises. Did the increasing resistance faced by Vikings contribute to a shift in their strategies from purely opportunistic raiding to more organized conquest and settlement? As easy targets became scarce and the risks of raiding increased, some historians argue that the Vikings were forced to adapt, seeking more permanent solutions to their economic pressures through invasion and colonization. Rather than hit-and-run tactics, you, struggling against a determined local, might instinctively feel the rising cost of simple plunder. You find yourself in a desperate melee, surrounded by angry faces. Your comrades are fighting fiercely, but some are falling, overwhelmed by sheer numbers or caught off guard. You see a familiar face, a man from your village, fall with a spear protruding from his chest. His eyes wide in disbelief, the brutal reality of death, up close and personal, is inescapable. This isn't just about loot anymore, it's about survival. The air is thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood. Yours and theirs. The sounds of battle are deafening, the screams of the wounded mingling with the enraged shouts of the defenders. You push, you swing, you parry, your muscles screaming with exertion. Your earlier seasickness and aches are forgotten, replaced by the primal urge to survive. The chieftain's horn sounds again, but this time, it's not the triumphant call to withdraw with loot. It's a harsh, urgent blast, a signal for retreat, for escape. The tide of battle has turned against you. The enemy is too numerous, too determined. You are forced to fall back. Abandoning any hope of plunder, you're focused entirely on reaching the longship. The retreat is a chaotic, desperate scramble. You run, dodging blows, pushing through the thick of the fight. Your heavy axe feeling like a lead weight. You hear the shouts of the pursuers behind you, their rage fueled by the defense of their homes and the memory of previous raids. Some of your comrades, slowed by wounds or exhaustion, are caught and cut down, their final screams echoing in your ears. You splash back into the icy water, leaping onto the longship. Your breath ragged, your body aching with exertion and the chill of the sea. The oarsmen pull with desperate urgency, churning the water, pushing the ship away from the hostile shore. You look back to see the enraged faces of the locals, still shouting, still shaking their crude weapons. The landscape, which seemed so promising just hours ago, now feels utterly hostile. You are empty-handed, perhaps even wounded. The earlier joy of plunder is long gone, replaced by the bitterness of failure and the chilling knowledge that you barely escaped with your life. The dream of easy riches has turned into a nightmare of struggle and loss. This raid, unlike the last, was a stark reminder that the terrifying life of a Viking raider sucked not just for the victims, but for you too. When the tables turn, the retreat from a failed raid leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. But the experience is not without its grim lessons. You've seen the ferocity of determined defenders, and you've felt the sharp sting of loss. Yet, even in defeat, the Viking longship is not empty. Besides your surviving comrades, there is another, silent cargo, the captives. These are the unfortunate souls who, unlike the plunder, cannot simply be picked up and carried away. Their fate is a brutal, enduring aspect of the Viking raid that sucks perhaps most of all for them. You see them huddled together on the longship, their faces etched with terror and despair. They might be monks, priests, women, or even children caught in the chaos of the raid. Their hands are often bound, their eyes wide and unseeing, staring out at the unfamiliar expanse of the sea. They are silent, save for the occasional sob or a quiet prayer whispered in a language you don't understand. Their presence on board is a constant, stark reminder of the violence you inflicted, a living testament to the human cost of your desperate ventures. Their journey is as miserable, if not more so, than your own. They endure the same cold, wet conditions, the same seasickness, but with the added terror of uncertainty and subjugation. They are given meager rations, just enough to keep them alive. For a dead captive is a useless one. You hear their moans in the night, their quiet desperation a chilling counterpoint to the restless sleep of your comrades. A universal historical fact that this grim scene underscores is the widespread practice of slavery in the Viking Age. Captives, known as thralls Norse for slaves, were a significant form of wealth and a vital part of the Viking economy. They were taken from raided lands and either put to work in Scandinavia, performing arduous tasks like farming, domestic chores, or construction, or traded in vast slave markets across Europe and even into the Byzantine Empire. Your raid, even a failed one in terms of material plunder, might still yield a valuable harvest of human beings. A peculiar, less commonly known detail that you might observe among the captives is the deliberate maiming or marking of some thralls to prevent escape or signify ownership. While not always practiced, some historical accounts or archaeological evidence suggest that captured slaves might have had their feet bound in ways that made running difficult, or even had specific marks or brands carved into their skin. You might notice subtle signs of this on some of the new captives, a chilling testament to the brutal realities of their new existence, and a grim deterrent for any thoughts of rebellion. As you gaze upon these unfortunate souls, an intriguing academic debate arises: to what extent did the Viking Age's reliance on thralls shape their societal structure and economic practices? Or was it a secondary, opportunistic outcome of raiding? Some historians argue that slavery was fundamental to the Norse economy, providing cheap labor for expansion and trade. Others contend that while present, it was often less central than agriculture or commerce. You, watching these new additions to your ship, realize their value as property, a living asset to be managed and eventually exploited. The atmosphere around the captives is one of palpable fear. They cling to each other, their faces betraying a profound sense of loss and hopelessness. You try not to meet their eyes, as direct contact might stir an empathy you can ill afford, or spark a desperate plea you cannot answer. They are merely cargo now, destined for a life of servitude, far from their homes and everything they ever knew. You might hear whispers among your comrades about the fate of the captives. Some will be taken back to your village, forced to work your fields, to tend your animals, or to serve in your home. Their labor will supplement your own, easing the burden of your harsh existence. Others will be sold at bustling slave markets, places like Dublin or Hedeby, exchanged for silver, furs, or other goods that cannot be acquired through raiding alone. This trade in human lives is a grim, yet accepted, part of your world. The responsibility of guarding the captives often falls to the younger, or less experienced raiders? A constant vigilance against desperate escape attempts? You might take your turn, spear in hand, watching over the shivering figures, listening to their hushed murmurs. It's a sobering duty, a stark reminder of the other side of the raiding coin. The return journey, already arduous, is made even more so by the presence of these unwilling passengers. Their needs, however minimal, add to the logistical challenges of fresh water and food. Their despair adds a heavy pall to the atmosphere on board, a quiet counterpoint to the occasional boisterousness of your comrades, as the longship finally nears the familiar shores of your homeland. You look at the captives one last time. Their faces are gaunt, their clothes tattered, but a flicker of grim determination might be visible in some eyes. They are survivors, like you, but their survival leads to a life of bondage. Their fate is the true, horrifying cost of Viking raids, a burden that far outweighs any fleeting treasure you might have gained. You are bringing back human spoils, and that, perhaps, sucks most of all for them. The longship finally cuts through the familiar waters of your fjord, bringing with it the bittersweet taste of return. You are home, but home isn't the sanctuary it once was. The seasons have turned, and the very land that drove you to raid now demands your full attention. A different kind of grueling struggle. You, the Viking raider, now face the harsh realities of surviving the off-season, a period often as challenging, if not more so, than the raids themselves. You disembark, your legs unsteady on solid ground after weeks or months at sea. The biting cold of the northern winter is already setting in, a stark contrast to the slightly milder climates you might have raided. Your pouch, though perhaps heavier than when you left, feels inadequate against the immense needs of your family and community. The initial excitement of return quickly fades, replaced by the grim realization of the work that lies ahead. Your longship is pulled ashore, carefully protected from the elements, its sails furled, its oars stowed. It will remain dormant through the long, dark months, a silent reminder of past ventures and future possibilities. Your focus shifts entirely from raiding to farming, fishing, and preparing for the brutal onslaught of winter. A universal historical fact that shapes your life now is the extreme difficulty of subsistence farming in the Nordic climate. The short growing season meant that every harvest was precarious, every stored barrel of salted fish or smoked meat vital for survival. Food scarcity was a constant threat, and a poor harvest could mean starvation for your family and community. The riches from raiding, while helpful, were often a temporary supplement, not a permanent solution to this fundamental challenge. A peculiar, less commonly known detail that you might now participate in is the meticulous and often communal process of bog butter production. This involved burying butter or other dairy products in peat bogs to preserve them over the long winter months. The bog's anaerobic and cool conditions acted as a natural refrigerator, and the peat imparted a distinct, earthy flavor. You might spend days digging peat, wrapping butter, and carefully placing it in the bog. A strange, ancient form of food preservation that speaks volumes about the desperate ingenuity required to survive as you toil on your land. An intriguing academic debate arises. To what extent did the Viking Age's reliance on a mixed economy farming, fishing, trading, and raiding contribute to their long-term resilience? Or did the constant need for raiding ultimately hinder sustainable development at home? Some historians argue that this diversified approach allowed them to adapt to environmental challenges and expand their influence. Others contend that the emphasis on short-term plunder diverted resources and labor from more stable, long-term economic growth. You, having just returned from a raid, are now a direct participant in this complex economic balancing act. The winter months are a struggle against the elements. The days are short, shrouded in perpetual twilight, and the nights are long, dark, and bitter cold. You spend countless hours mending tools, repairing your home, and tending to your livestock, ensuring they have enough fodder to survive the freezing temperatures. The pervasive chill seeps into your bones, and the lack of fresh food leaves you feeling weak and constantly hungry. Sickness is another constant threat, with poor nutrition, cramped living conditions, and the pervasive cold. Illnesses spread easily through your household and village. A cough can quickly turn into a deadly fever, and without advanced medicine, even a simple cold can be dangerous. You worry for your children, for your aging parents, knowing that the harsh winter claims many lives, often more subtly than the sword of an enemy. The food you eat is monotonous dried fish, preserved meat, root vegetables, and perhaps some coarse bread made from stored grain. Fresh produce is a distant memory. You savor every bite. Keenly aware of the finite supply in your stores, you spend time carving tools, weaving nets, or mending clothes. Every task purposeful, every effort aimed at ensuring survival until the spring thaw. The atmosphere in the longhouse is one of quiet endurance. Families huddle together for warmth, sharing stories, mending equipment, and performing daily chores. The familiar rhythms of communal life provide a measure of comfort against the isolating cold. But beneath the surface, there's a constant tension, a gnawing worry about whether the stored food will last, whether the family will make it through another brutal winter. The skills you gained on the raid, the ability to wield an axe, to navigate, to endure hardship, are still useful, but applied in a different context. Your strength is now used to chop firewood, to mend fences, to pull fishing nets from icy waters. The grim determination that saw you through battle is now channeled into the daily grind of survival. As the sun, a pale, distant orb, slowly begins to gain strength in the sky, and the first signs of spring emerge, a collective sigh of relief sweeps through your community. You have survived another winter, but the cycle is relentless. The land demands more, the mouths need feeding, and the lure of distant riches, however tarnished by the realities of raiding, will inevitably begin to call again. The memory of the harsh off-season will once again push you towards the uncertain promise of the longship and the dangerous adventures beyond the fjord. The harsh grip of winter finally loosens, and the long, cold nights give way to the burgeoning promise of spring. The longship, patiently waiting on the shore, is once again readied for the sea. Your body, though weary from the winter's toil, feels a familiar, almost primal urge to return to the raid. But this time, the journey home carries a different kind of tension, a quiet assessment of your gains and losses. This is the stage of homeward bound, with often empty hands, where the dreams of vast riches confront the sobering reality of what you truly managed to acquire. You embark, the ship feeling lighter than after your last raid, a stark reminder of the meager spoils you managed to gather. The atmosphere among the crew is subdued, a mix of relief at leaving the hostile foreign shores and disappointment over the lack of a truly significant haul. The vibrant chatter of men dreaming of glory has been replaced by a quiet contemplation. The occasional murmur about the harshness of the journey, or the fierce resistance encountered. The voyage home is a mirror image of the journey out the same relentless waves, the same chilling spray, the same monotonous diet of dried fish and hardtack. But now, without the adrenaline of the raid, or the immediate excitement of plunder, the discomfort of the open longship feels even more pronounced. Every ache, every chill, every bout of seasickness seems amplified by the knowledge that your efforts might not have truly paid off. A universal historical fact that becomes starkly apparent on this return journey is that Viking raids were inherently high-risk, high-reward ventures, with many expeditions yielding little or even negative returns, while the sagas glorify grand victories and massive hordes. The reality for many common raiders was a much more modest outcome. Ships could be lost to storms, raids could be repelled, and the acquired loot might not be enough to justify the immense personal risk and hardship endured. You are now a living testament to the high-stakes gamble that often didn't pay off. A peculiar, Less commonly known detail that might surface among the crew during the long journey is the practice of blood debt, or obligations to the jarl or ship owner. Any losses or damages to the ship, or the need for provisions, might be offset against your share of the plunder, or even create a debt you owe. That small amount of silver you thought you secured might dwindle further once these communal costs are tallied. The concept of profit in this context is far more complex and often less generous for the individual raider than one might imagine, as you count your almost empty gains. An intriguing academic debate arises: did the perception of Viking wealth and success, largely fueled by chroniclers and later sagas, overshadow the more common reality of hardship and limited gain for most participants? While spectacular finds like the Sutton Hoo burial certainly confirm immense wealth, these were likely the exception, not the rule. Were the common raiders aware of the true odds, or were they perpetually lured by the myth of easy riches? Much like a modern-day lottery ticket, returning with a relatively empty pouch, feel the stark gap between the glorious tales and your lived experience. You look at the few items you manage to keep, perhaps a small, tarnished silver coin, a piece of worn cloth, or a crudely carved wooden figurine. These are the tangible remnants of your adventure, souvenirs of a struggle that consumed weeks or months of your life. They feel insignificant against the backdrop of the vast, indifferent ocean and the looming demands of your homeland. The journey feels longer, heavier, now burdened by the quiet disappointment that hangs in the air. You look at your comrades, their faces reflecting the same weariness and perhaps a touch of bitterness. Some might be nursing unhealed wounds, a grim reminder of the close calls. Others stare blankly at the horizon, already contemplating the next winter, the next planting season, and the inevitable call to embark on another raid. The sun, when it appears, offers little warmth. The wind is still biting, and the ocean, though familiar, feels less like a path to adventure and more like a vast, empty space. You think of your family waiting on shore, their hopes perhaps too high for the meager bounty you carry, the unspoken pressure to provide, to make this risky venture worthwhile, weighs heavily on your shoulders as the longship finally sails into your home fjord. The familiar landscape appears, rugged and comforting, yet demanding. The cheering, if any, is subdued. The welcome is tinged with the quiet understanding of what was endured and what was not gained. You step onto the familiar soil, your body aching, your spirit weary, and your hands, though not entirely empty, certainly not filled with the mythical riches you once dreamed of. The true cost of the Viking raid, for you, was far more than just the journey itself. The sound of your longship settling back into its winter berth on the shore brings a strange mix of relief and melancholy. The raiding season is over. You survived, but the cost, the lingering stain of your life as a Viking raider, is far more profound than any battle scar or empty purse. It's a weight that settles deep in your bones, a constant echo of the violence, hardship, and moral compromises you endured. You are no longer just the farmer or fisherman who embarked on that first perilous journey. You are a man shaped by bloodshed, by the terror you inflicted, and by the desperate fear you faced. The world, once simple, now seems far more complex and brutal. The very act of taking what was not yours, of forcing others into servitude, leaves an indelible mark on your soul, whether you acknowledge it or not. You find yourself less inclined to share tales of glory, often preferring the quiet solitude of your longhouse, the boisterous bragging of younger, less experienced raiders who only dream of easy plunder. Grates on you. You know the true cost, the brutal reality hidden beneath the bravado. The silence of the long winter nights is often filled with the haunting whispers of past raids, the screams of the innocent, the desperate pleas of the captives. A universal historical fact that your experience embodies is that the Viking Age, while remembered for its adventurous spirit and exploration, was built upon a foundation of immense violence and human suffering. For every glorious saga of a chieftain's triumph, there were countless untold stories of victims whose lives were shattered, and raiders who endured unimaginable hardship and often met brutal ends. The golden age of the Vikings was a terrifying era for those on the receiving end of their raids, and a hard, dangerous life even for many who carried the axe. A peculiar, less commonly known detail that now resonates with you is the psychological impact of sustained violence on the raiders themselves, while contemporary accounts focus on the victims. Modern understanding suggests that repeated exposure to combat, the killing of civilians, and the constant threat of death would have led to a range of psychological tolls. From desensitization to forms of trauma, you might find yourself more prone to fits of rage, periods of dark brooding, or chilling indifference to the suffering of others, unintended consequences of your brutal profession. As you reflect on the choices that led you to this life, an intriguing academic debate arises: did the Viking raids, despite their immediate destructive impact, ultimately contribute to the long-term cultural and economic integration of Europe, while they brought immense devastation? They also facilitated trade routes, spread technological innovations like shipbuilding, and led to the eventual settlement and assimilation of Norse populations into various European societies. Were they simply destroyers? Or were they, inadvertently, catalysts for a new interconnected Europe? You, a product of this destructive force, can only witness the immediate impact, not the vast sweep of historical consequence. Your body, though hardened, carries the aches and stiffness of old wounds, permanent reminders of near-fatal encounters. The cold, wet years on the longship have settled deep into your bones, and the scars on your skin tell stories only you can fully interpret. You are an older man now, perhaps, your hair streaked with gray, your eyes holding a depth of experience that few around you possess. The cycles continue: the harsh winter, the frantic spring planting, the brief summer of fishing, and then, inevitably, the preparation for another raiding season. The pressures that drove you to the sea in the first place, the scarcity of land, the desire for sustenance, the demands of your family persist. You are caught in a relentless loop, a product of your environment and the brutal choices it forces upon you. You look at the younger generation, their eyes bright with the same dreams of glory and riches that once lured you. You offer no grand tales, no romanticized versions of the raid. Your words are often brief, grim, tinged with a weariness that only those who have truly lived the life can understand. You advise caution, patience, and the brutal necessities of survival, not the fleeting exhilaration of plunder. The longship, sleeping on the shore, remains a powerful symbol. For some, it is a promise of adventure and wealth. For you, it is a reminder of unimaginable hardship, of bloodshed, and of the profound cost of chasing distant dreams. The life of a Viking raider, you now know with chilling certainty, was a grim existence for all involved, leaving a lingering stain that even time cannot fully erase. The icy winds of the North Sea gently fade, and the clang of axes against foreign shores becomes a distant echo in the quiet night. The figures of the raiders, hardened by the elements and grim deeds, slowly recede into the mists of history. Let the chilling realities of their lives, the harsh voyages, the brutal encounters, and the quiet despair of their victims, settle softly in your mind. This chapter of human history, though filled with violence, also speaks of resilience, of desperation, and the enduring human struggle against unforgiving circumstances. May the quiet understanding of their world bring you a deeper sense of peace in your own. Now, rest deeply, and let the long, long night welcome you.